Hey, what's going on, ADPI Nation? This is another episode of the Active Duty Passive Income Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Brenner, and today we are going to be talking about ADUs. And this is kind of a hot topic lately. It's been going around the mass media, if you will, what's going on with zoning laws in single family homes around the country. It's not just a where you live kind of a thing, but pretty much what's happening, as everyone knows listening to this podcast, unless you've been, I don't know, living under a rock, there's a massive housing shortage in the United States of America. And the reason is not because there isn't a lot of land. There's a ton of land here. There's so much land. Problem is, it just takes a long time to build a house. In fact, as of this year, we are behind on houses, like to the tune of 6.5 million houses. And a lot of governments are trying to figure out a way, how the heck do we wrap our arms around this problem? And they're going back to things governments can control. And one of those is zoning. And we'll get into it here with our guest, because she is a zoning expert. She's an ADU expert. She is in beautiful San Diego, which is like, I don't know, like the king of ADUs. Oh, she's really making it work out there. But Meredith Stowers, thank you. Thanks for joining the show. And I appreciate your service as was it 15-year military spouse, Navy military?
Yeah, 13 moves in 15 years, and I bought, flipped, fixed along the way. So
So you are living the military real estate investor dream. And that's something that we've really been trying to quote unquote coin lately. But that lifestyle, that is making lemonade out of lemons, right? You got to move every 2 years.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Meredith, let's talk about the issue at hand here. I want to jump right into this. So as I alluded to at the top of the show, we're behind on 6.5 million homes. That's just a function of mathematics, right? So if that is in fact the case, and governments can control zoning, what, in your opinion, is the major lever that governments can control when it comes to zoning in local municipalities?
Well, what you're seeing is for years and years, for the last 20 years, really, the Gen X generation was half the size of baby boomers. And so we didn't build housing in the last 20 years. And now you have this avalanche of millennials getting married, having kids, and they want the dream, right? And they're bigger than the baby boomers. And so there's this incredible demand for housing. But the problem is you've had NIMBYs for not in my backyard.
So Meredith, I want to jump into the main problem here. I mentioned at the top of the show, we know that we're 6.5 million homes short in this country. I mean, it's just a function of mathematics, right? And we know that local governments, what they can do is they can control zoning. How does the whole ADU role, and what you've seen in San Diego and elsewhere, how does the whole ADU role kind of play into the hands of local governments and municipalities?
Well, basically, ADUs make legal again what we've always had. Technically speaking, they're granny flats. But in California, you can have up to 3 additional granny flats or units on an owner-occupied house. In other areas like Atlanta, Virginia, et cetera, the whole world is opening up to ADUs. Why ADUs? Because they're politically more acceptable than saying, oh, you can have a duplex, you can have a triplex, because the NIMBYs don't like that, right? But what that
Hold on. A
means,
NIMBY? What is a NIMBY?
it's Joe Bob neighbor, not in my backyard. You can't build that. You can't do that.
Not in my backyard. NIMBY. I've never heard that before. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And so rather than take each construction project one by one so that the neighbors can go oppose it, they're saying, no. This entire city, this entire state, we are rezoning the whole swath. So we're not dealing with the NIMBYs anymore, because the permit departments have just been overwhelmed by that. Now, a lot of permit departments don't like that, and you should be aware of that and be sensitive to their emotions, because that is their fiefdom. But bottom line is, you can take a single family home in California and you can turn it into a fourplex. And that's really important, because duplex and fourplexes are the sweet spot in residential lending, right? Especially for VA and house hacking. That's how you get your mortgage paid for, right? But they're hard to find. They're very hard to find because nobody's been building those and the regulations are largely against that. So rather than go and look for a duplex and a fourplex, what my clients are doing is finding a single family home, living in it, and building 3 additional units. What's really exciting to show you how little housing we have in California along the coast, on average, you're buying at $800 to $1,000 per square foot. Well, hopefully your members are buying a lot smarter than that, but still, it's
Wow.
expensive. You're building anywhere between $250 to $400 per square foot.
Mm.
And so that's how the cost of building, all of my investors have pivoted to ADUs, but first-time home buyers can do it too.
Right. And this is really interesting. This ties into we did a 2-part episode with Keegan Wetzel. He is a Academy grad, and he's really into the ADU space in Southern California. I think San Diego as well.
Mhm.
And he shared a ton of information. So ADPI Nation, if you're vibing with what Meredith is saying right now, go back like 4 or 5 episodes, and there'll be a 2-parter with Keegan. He goes even into more details on how to underwrite these things and how to make it happen. But he touched on a very similar point. I don't know if the numbers were around what you're saying, where to buy something new and not even new necessarily, but to buy something at $800 to $1,000 a square foot versus build something which you can add more income, more cash flow to your bottom line. It's almost like a no-brainer. And this is obviously very market specific to Southern California, but when we look at the entire nation as a whole, is, in your opinion, because correct me if I'm wrong, but these ADU rules, I mean, this is a relatively new shift in Southern California. Was it the last 10 years, maybe?
Yeah, last 5 years,
Last
and
5 years?
I'm now the largest ADU lender in the state, actually, up and down the coastline, but also inland, in less expensive areas where you're buying at $500 per square foot. I've got clients in Atlanta, in North Carolina. So, and the key is Googling ADU and your local permit offices. You can find that online, but you can also literally call or walk into the permit counter. It's literally a counter and say, this is my property. What could I do? How many units could I do?
Mhm.
And the permit guys are there to help you, right? And sometimes they get, persnickety, but if you say something like, if you were me, what would you do? Right? Let them be the hero and you will discover what you can build on your property. It's
Hmm.
amazing.
Now, do you think that, because from everything that I hear is that this is, and I guess I'm not boots on the ground, you are. Is this helping, like this loosening of the zoning regulations, right?
Yes.
Is this helping house more people? Is this helping solve the problem, or is this just like a money grab for investors out there?
No, this is absolutely helping solve the problem. And actually, most of my clients aren't investors, they're families. When
Hmm.
you think about global housing, America's very unique in that we've built housing for the nuclear family. That's very weird.
Hmm.
Most of the rest of the world has grandma in the back and Uncle Joe and the cousins. They have family compounds that are multi generational legacies. And so families in America are now rediscovering grandma and grandpa, they want to be close to their kids, they've got grandchildren, so they build this huge house in the backyard. Maybe auntie so and so lives in a little unit next door, and then the kids are in the set, can run around in the central courtyard and central grass areas. Grandparents can take care of the kids, the adult kids can take care of the grandparents as they age. That's how most of the world lives. So, and frankly, the family that invests together stays together, not just for this generation, but what a legacy to for years to come,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's a really good point, and that's kind of what I'm gathering, because we know that there's like a massive housing shortage, like that's just a fact. But how are governments tackling this? And it's very few governments are taking as drastic a step as San Diego has. I know Charlotte, North Carolina is one of
Mhm.
those markets. San Diego, and there's a handful of others out there, but in where I am in Northern Virginia, it's just kind of coming around, but the counties are very much. I'm thinking, I never heard the term NIMBY, but I'm guessing that's what it's about,
Right.
because in Arlington County, for example, I don't think it's ADU friendly yet, but they're contributing to that, right? And then or considering that legislation. But in Fairfax County, for example, it's just really strict to do anything. But
Right,
when you drive around in Northern Virginia and Washington D.C., people are on top of each other.
right,
People are just on top of each other. There is no housing solutions out there. And part of me thinks about, okay, well, you're adding all these ADUs and all of this stuff. That's great. But really, ultimately, what you're trading is you are housing more people, but at the expense of population density and
right.
that going up. So it's great to have more people and to house more people and put roofs over people's head. That's awesome. The NIMBY folks out there are gonna be like, oh, it's gonna get too crowded around here. The main thing for that I think about from an MSA standpoint, a market standpoint, and a real estate development standpoint is, hey, you can have all the houses and ADUs and this, that, and the other, but if you don't have the schools, the hospitals, the infrastructure, the roads, then you got nothing. You got a problem. So what are
Yeah.
governments? Yeah, what is San Diego? And I'm just curious your
Yes,
opinion. Yeah,
yes
like
and
what's going on?
no. This is a property tax revenue cash cow for the
Mm,
cities.
that's a good point.
And in fact, when the city of Los Angeles started doing this, they ended up waiving, they call them impact fees. In other words, it's the fee to help upgrade, the sewers and the
Mhm.
roads and all this kind of stuff, right? When City of LA realized how much more in property taxes they're getting because of the additional square footage, they're like, oh yeah, we're waiving those impact fees. This is a cash cow. And by the way, I mean, what California is discovering, as Oregon did, is that most of these are unpermitted additions that
Mhm.
people naturally do. And so even if I wouldn't encourage you to do anything illegal, but if you have a McMansion in McLean, right, and you're
Mhm.
using a percentage of that, let's say you've got a formal living and dining room that you only use at Christmas. Well, you can wall that up and create an awesome two-bedroom ADU right there, right? And I mean, that to me is classic house hacking. Not renting out rooms is having their own separate thing. You can tear it down later, that's fine. But a lot of people are doing that within your own wall, carving up space.
Oh
So,
wow. So just getting creative and you bring up a good point because from the city's perspective, they're getting a lot more tax money. And it's kind of like the short-term rental play, right? Like,
right.
oh, the cities don't want short-term rentals because the not in my backyard people and they're picketing outside. But when you look at it financially, they're getting significantly more tax money from the short term because they're taking short-term rental taxes to the tune
Oh,
of
heck yeah.
10, 13, 15% off the top.
Yeah,
So like they're making money, but they also have to placate the people, right? So
right.
it is a balancing act. And to your other point about bringing on ADUs and just the reason those cities are getting more property tax value is because when you go and put on that extra 2, 3 units,
Yep.
you're going to get reassessed and your property value is going to skyrocket just because it will.
Right, it will. Now in California, what's cool, because the whole California property taxes are a
Oh yeah.
mess because of Prop 13, but the primary land and the house is not reassessed, only the square footage of the ADU. I usually see an extra $100 a month because the assessors don't charge. I think ultimately that will change. But there's a lot going on in California housing because it's such a mess.
Talk to
So
me about what Prop 13. I don't know what that is.
Oh, Proposition 13 means that if your tax basis from the time you buy it doesn't really change. So your property taxes remain the same. So, and your kids can inherit that house and the property tax basis will not change. So, for example, in Old Coronado, where you have old families, they'll have these $4 or $5 million mansions, but they're paying $50 a month in property taxes. The average home buyer in San Diego is paying $800 to $1,000 per month in property taxes. So California is kind of jacked up that way compared to other states, but it's California. What are you going to do? And you get California rents. So
That's a good point. You're getting California rent. So yeah, I mean, this is so interesting for folks in California or outside of California. A couple of things that I want to we've talked about already the state of the market and where we are with ADUs, and it seems to be that in your opinion that this like San Diego is a test and it's working, right? It's solving the problem. Do you think this is going to spread to other similar affected markets around the country?
Absolutely. State of New York adopted California's rules. Cities, I mean, just Google search, and pretty much every city in America is starting to adopt ADU rules, because who could possibly be against grandma having, a flat? So, and in fact, cities and states are incentivizing these ADUs. California has a $40,000 grant program to help pay for the soft costs of building, and 90% of last year's grant recipients were my clients. This year, we won't have that out until October probably, but it's really, I mean, that's how badly California wants ADUs. City of San Diego is especially unique because they have an ADU bonus program. You can have unlimited
Mm.
ADUs on a property, and on a single family zone property. And Gary Geiler, the head of permitting, swears that there's one property that he's doing with 100 units, but realistically, I usually see 6 or 8 units, and it feels they're usually single unit. There's a place in Talmadge for veterans and military.
Mhm.
Gorgeous neighborhood, and it still looks and feels like a single family home, and it's single room units for that.
Yeah.
And that's really the best option.
Yeah, and it's super interesting because if for folks in California who have been to Southern California, you drive around and yeah, LA is a great example. Obviously, there's downtown LA and all of that stuff, but when you start getting out into the neighborhoods that surround LA, the lots that these houses on are massive. The way LA was designed was exactly right, like you talked about earlier, Meredith. The nuclear family, a big old house on a
Hmm.
big old corner lot, and like their front yards are like bigger than they're just huge. They're just massive. So there's so much room to grow, if you will, with the ADU model in place. And so I encourage folks wherever you are, you're listening to this podcast, look into your local zoning laws and see what's coming on the books. It may have changed. It may be up to vote. If you have ability to vote and attend zoning hearings and stuff and let your voice be heard, this could be a huge opportunity if you're like Meredith's clients out there and crushing it in the ADU game, or like Keegan who's crushing it in the ADU game. Like it could this this show could be coming to your neighborhood very soon.
Yeah.
But you got to position yourself in a way to win. So talk to me, Meredith, about the ADU grant. Is that what you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, the ADU grant is a grant because California is very much aware that the permit time and design time takes forever.
Hmm.
Typically, I see in California about 2 to 3 months for designs, and I see about 6 months for permits. And so people don't want to take a loan out and pay on that loan.
For nine
That's like
months.
$11,000, yeah, for
Yeah,
nine
yeah.
months. So the grant is supposed to help cover those soft costs, and then you do the loan closer to the time of construction. A couple of thoughts though. The first step, like any investment, is get pre-qualified,
Yep.
because you're going to work backward to your budget and build to your budget. If you do this right, you should have no down payments, no money out of savings, etc. It should, and then also you want to do that because the mortgage guidelines are a little different than the permit guidelines. There's some workarounds. And third, you want to optimize for rental income. A lot of people think you need to build this 1,200 square foot 3-bedroom ADU to optimize rental income. In fact, you're optimizing for the number of kids in your yard. If you
Hmm.
have room for a 3-bedroom, then do 3 one-bedroom units.
Hmm.
Because in City of San Diego, those will rent for 2,100 to 2,500 each, $7,500 in income, and that cost is about $1,000 a month. So a rough number, at least in California, is nationwide, every 100,000 you spend is ultimately going to cost about $500 a month. Conversely, move the decimal point, every 10,000 you spend is about $50 a month. And while you're working on this, so detached ADU in California is round about 200,000. That's about $1,000 a month, and anything you're going to rent starting at 2,100 at least.
So there's some meat on the bone, is what you're saying, and that's
Oh,
yeah.
cash cows, cash
and
cows.
and that, remember, that is a long-term rental strategy. So people who listen to the
Right.
podcast know that I'm into short-term rentals and midterm rentals and all of that stuff. Depending on where you're at and if there's permits required and this, that, and the other, you
Mm-hmm.
could expand upon. Obviously, you want to underwrite for the most conservative option, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so you underwrite for long-term rentals, but then you say, what? I'm going to keep two of these a short-term rental and one a long-term rental, and I'm going to live in the front house. There you go. I mean, you can really be cash flow
Yep.
and make something really special for yourself there. So man, that is super 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 interesting. So I'm excited kind of to see where this goes, because there are some other markets. I mean, a lot of listeners, actually, I don't know if the listeners know this or not, but personal news, my wife and I are looking to leave Washington, D.C. So,
Oh, surprise, surprise.
yes, surprise, surprise. The dumpster fire that is the capital. No, it's not. It's not that. It's for us. It's we want to start a family, and it's not
Yeah,
super safe here, and it's ridiculous cost of living, and the schools suck, and there's a lot of things. Sorry to anyone who really loves DC who's listening to this podcast, but live here
I
for
did the
5 years
same
and you'll
thing.
learn.
Yeah, I got out, I left Arlington, got off the
Uh,
treadmill,
uh,
and yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So but we're looking, and it's interesting as we evaluate things, and I look at different places to live, and I'm looking at it from an investment standpoint, saying, wow, I wonder where this market's going to go. We're headed to Huntsville this weekend to check out Huntsville. It's a small
Super hot
city,
market.
super hot market, exploding right now. Like, that's the place. If you have the freedom to go and go somewhere and invest somewhere, it's great investing in your backyard, and it's even better if you can choose your own backyard and you have that freedom. But looking at the trends, Meredith, where these ADUs, where this legislation is going, and San Diego being the test bed, and it's going off
Hmm.
wonderfully, then where is it going to go next? If you can figure out, hey, I want to predict that, and I want to
Hmm.
get in at the relative ground floor,
Yep,
then you're gonna do very, very well. We call it the pathway to progress in investing, and that's
right.
exactly what you'll be doing. So look for these markets that are on the come up, and find out why, and then dig into their zoning, and see what's going to happen,
Yep,
and what's on the books. And you might be able to go and get a single family property that's on a larger lot, and
yep.
then go and build ADUs just as the legislation comes out. And once it's out, man, it's out. So it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, Texas is very pro ADU. Texas, you can pretty much do whatever you want. By the way, an alternative, it's not just rental income, but if you're getting started and you need to create that pad of cash, a lot of states like Texas and Oregon and Washington State now allow you to condotize the property and sell off the units.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
yeah, it is interesting. So if you can build a house, and California is now passing that legislation. But talking about cities, Atlanta is a really good choice. I really like the Raleigh, North Carolina area.
Hmm.
And you have southern cost to build, but California rents, and they do have ADUs, ADU laws. So Raleigh, North Carolina, great schools, great, lots of
Hmm.
growing community, the Triangle area. I think that's fantastic. Seattle now allows 2 ADUs. So for those of you up in Bremerton and all that, 2 ADUs per property. And again, you can either rent them out, sell them off, etc. So Denver has it now. I mean, pretty much every city in America, you can do this. And
Wow.
that's exactly the property you're looking for. My recommendation is you search for property that has a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet
Hmm.
and an attached garage, attached, because the detached garages, generally speaking, are so poorly built that you end up
Hmm.
spending. So a detached garage, that's typically 200,000. An attached garage is 50 to 100,000, because really the roof trussing and the roof and the
Hmm.
trussing is built to the standard house, and then the foundations are the same. You'll know in the backyard if your detached garage can be converted. Just dig down a little bit and see how big the foundation is. Usually it's a 4-inch pour with no rebar reinforcement, which is why there's tons of cracks in it. Well, if that's the case, you got to rip the whole thing out and rebuild.
That's a
So,
really good tip. Yeah. So
yeah.
so let's run through that again. 5,000 square foot
Mm,
lot size. And this is criteria. Just summarizing. This is criteria that if you are looking to buy a property, if you're
mhm.
you're a military real estate investor listening to this podcast right now, this is actionable stuff right here. You are looking to buy a property in a market where there's ADUs available, and you're going to build some ADUs on this property. You're looking for, Meredith, you said 5,000 square foot lot. You're looking
Mhm.
for, what was it, a 3-bed, 2-bath with an attached garage, or that
As
doesn't
long
matter?
as it has an attached garage, because if you go by, the first thing you're going to do is convert that attached garage immediately. And that's something you can DIY yourself. I've personally done that kind of work
Hmm.
myself, believe it or not. I live at Home Depot. So, and that's something you can rent out right away. Design wise, don't just slap a door where the garage door it was. Slap a door to the side, because then you're walking out the front. your renter is walking out the side and everybody has privacy. Design
Mm.
really matters with ADUs as well. Value engineering is the technical term that we use with our contractors. There's a couple of key things you need to know about building. Number one, build a nice square foundation, because then the roof and the roof trussing, you can buy commercial trusses. If the guys have to hand build the roof, super expensive.
Oh, good point.
Yeah. Second thing is you want one wet wall, meaning that all the plumbing
Hmm.
and the utilities are along one wall, and it's the wall closest to the trenching to the house. Otherwise, you're trenching all around your house, and that's expensive.
So in a garage, the trench, like that stuff would be on like if I'm picturing a garage door that opens up and the house is on the right side, the rest of the house is on the right side. The trenching would be on the left side, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
got it.
if you can. Yeah. So keep the trenching simple for the utilities.
Mhm.
Third, consider an ultra modern look with concrete floors. Add a little coloring, like nice earthy
Mhm.
brown, and epoxy it. And that saves you 20 to 40 grand on floor tiles and carpet. No one's doing carpet anymore because of
Yeah.
the health liability, allergies, et cetera, anyway, and make it ADA compliant. Some of your best
Mm.
renters are little old ladies, right? And you get a little old lady back there, she will stay for years and years at an automatic rent increase every year, so not renegotiating it. And she's on a fixed income, so it's like guaranteed pay. You're going to have a beautiful yard, a quiet renter, nobody partying and trashing the house. Those are great ways to go.
Oh man, that's great. I love this actionable advice, Meredith. This is so awesome. Before we go into the bonus round here, I want to talk about, you kind of alluded to it, but the loan products that are available for this type of build. And we're going to go back to that example of, hey, I'm in a new market, whatever that market is. They said I could build, the zoning says I can build 3 ADUs. I have a 5,000 square foot place in mind. It's got the attached garage, this, that, and the other. What are we doing? A construction loan here? Are we getting maybe a regular VA loan and then we're getting a construction rider on top of it? Like what's out there right now, and where do you
Great
see that market going?
Great question. You can use a VA. VA has a renovation loan. The key to the VA renovation loan is the ADUs must be attached to the primary house.
Okay.
So
So
that's
that's your
usually,
garage situation.
yes. I typically do a flat purchase, just get the agents out of there. It's too hectic and hairy, and agents don't want to deal with renovation loans, right? And then the second thing you're doing is probably a construction HELOC.
Mm,
Very unique product. It's a second mortgage and it's based on the future appraised value. That's the difference
interesting.
with renovation and construction loans. Quite literally, we send the appraiser out with the pretty architectural designs and the floor plan, and he says, "Oh, I see what you're going to build. Instead of your house being worth 700,000, it's going, when you're done with construction, it's going to be worth 900,000, and that's the number we do the loan on. So we have a great construction HELOC product. We also, for investment property, we can do that for investment properties as well as primary homes. We've got some construction bridge loans, all that kind of stuff. What's important about the construction loan, what you're looking for, even a simple HELOC, great product if you have the equity. And we've got some HELOCs that go up to 95% of current value, so that's flexible. What I love about HELOCs and construction loans is it's like a giant credit card on your home. You only pay on what you use. We don't want you being
Hmm.
crushed under a loan while you're waiting for some guy to stamp permits, right?
Right.
You do need to have reserves toward the end to pay like the last 3 months of construction before you get a renter in. So that's something important. I'd say at least 3 months of reserves. But those, if you're doing it right, you basically have no money out of pocket except for closing costs on the purchase and the appraisals. So you do the purchase, you do the construction HELOC, and then most people do a classic rate and term refinance, oftentimes pulling out their VA cert to go buy their next one, right? So
Hmm.
you refinance it into a nice Fannie Mae loan, and you should be almost no money out of pocket.
Wow. That's some awesome advice there. I love
Even
that.
for even first-time home buyers can do it, and it's the ultimate house hack.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, because in ADPI, obviously, we talk about house hacking, and the traditional is let's buy a duplex, triplex, quadplex. That's how I got started. Then there's also a let's do a live and flip, or let's do this. This is kind of like it's kind of like mixing a house hack and a live and flip, because you're improving the property, you're living there, but
Right.
then you're putting people in it. It's just it's like the best of both worlds. And man, I really love it. And I'd love to see where this ADU, not strategy, because it's a proven strategy. It's not that it's
Yep.
not proven, but where the legislation is going and what markets it's going to next. You said it's in Seattle, it's in Oregon, it's in California, New York is adopting the rules. So think of these places, guys. You're listening to this podcast. Texas, you said, is ADU friendly. Atlanta, high population density areas, but that also have houses that sit on larger plots of land.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can go and figure that out and go and say, okay, there's a lot of people moving here. There's high population density, or the population density, or the population growth over the last 5 years, which is something that if you're in the military multifamily academy, that's a key metric to look at when you're evaluating a pathway to progress. You can go and look at that and say, okay, this area is growing, and there happens to be a lot of single family homes that sit on lots, and I'd be willing to bet that there's a housing shortage locally. So how can we predict where this is going, and maybe you can get your foot in the door that way. And it's really, really special. Meredith, man, this has been so awesome. Thank you for
Cool.
coming on. We have to talk about Operation Homefront. Briefly tell me what's going on with you in Operation Homefront. I want to know.
Yeah, so I originally founded Operation Homefront. We were stationed in Camp Pendleton during 9/11, and I was just in between flips and stuff. It was one of our temporary moves. And I just saw what was going down, and a group of military wives and I across the nation founded it as just a hands-on, zero staff, like, let's just help people. Because I remember one guy got married and he brought his girlfriend, who was now wife, out from Georgia. She was pregnant. And I mean, these are young kids. He left her behind with 16 McDonald's hamburgers to go on deployment for 9 months. And it was like, okay, that because he said she didn't
Husband of
eat
the year.
much, so that's gonna last you, right?
Oh my
And
God.
it was just crazy for young people, but also teaching them, helping each other out. I'm very proud of the work that we did across over that time, and helping people ultimately during the housing crisis. We were providing housing for families and just helping them through. So it was a really good time with a lot of good people. A lot of my good friends are now over at Soldiers Angels, which is, I'm proud of them. They're the youngest, I'd say the youngest nonprofit on the VA Council. So, and they're still fighting the good fight. There's just so much good work being done. I'm here in San Diego. I live a stone's throw from Naval Base Coronado, the SEAL complex and all that. And those are my peeps. That's who we grew up with. So a lot of good work.
That's really
Yeah.
cool. So you guys being a nonprofit, and essentially what you're doing is you're helping military spouses, it sounds like.
Yeah, and a lot of spouses, but also active duty, whole families. It's looking at the whole picture. So, yeah.
That's really, really cool.
Mm.
Congratulations on creating that and having the vision for it and seeing it succeed. It's really powerful, and the impact that you're making
Thank you.
is wow, Meredith. That is so cool. Just seeing the impact and having the vision to start the nonprofit Operation Homefront and seeing where it's grown. That's just really, really impressive. I love that.
Yeah.
All right, it is that time. It is time to take you to the bonus round. The same 4 questions we ask each and every guest on the Active Duty Passive Income podcast. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, question number 1. What book or software has really been helping you crush it lately?
Carol Dweck and Angela Duckworth. Carol Dweck has growth mindset, and Angela Duckworth's grit. And grit has a really cool test, like just how strong and gritty are you? And grit is not a set thing. You can grow your grit. And grit and creative mindset, and how you grow that and learn and stay in a place of humbleness. I'm a huge believer just trying to be humble, hungry, and smart. And those 2 books really train your mind for that.
That's awesome. We'll have links directly to those books so you can pick them up. And the Grit, it reminds me of that movie Grit, the old Western, and then the remake of the Western. And I was like, oh man, Grit. Yeah. And that's kind of a theme of that movie, is that you're not born with it. You can develop it throughout the trials and tribulations that you have in your life.
Yeah.
Question number 2, who's your biggest hero and why?
Margaret Thatcher, actually.
Oh,
She was, if you look back, she was an incredible woman who took Great Britain at a time when they were really dying on the vine, and she basically regrew Britain into one of the world's great powers by telling them not that they deserve more handouts and all that, but literally telling them you need to get back to work and you need to be grittier.
yeah. Yeah, that's true.
She was tough on that. It was a
Yeah,
hard message, but it was the right message.
that's great. Question number 3, lightening up a little bit. What do you like to do for fun in sunny San Diego?
I love to ride my bike around Imperial Beach in Coronado. I just love it. I have this little beach cruiser
Oh,
and I bike everywhere. So,
that's awesome. Yeah, I used to do that all through DC, and then I got one of those one-wheel skateboard looking things, and now
yeah,
I just
yeah.
one wheel everywhere. And I don't know, I guess I pedaling was just too much exercise for me. So now I
I was
just
going to say it's a little easier. Yeah, I know. And you can ride those on the sidewalks. It gets a little scary in DC with the bikes.
yeah, a little bit. All right. Final question for you, arguably our most important question. You've dropped so many nuggets so far, but I'm going to ask you for 3 more nuggets of wisdom for folks who are listening to this podcast. Light bulbs are going off in their head and they're like, man, I can get started with this ADU thing. And what would be 3 nuggets of wisdom that you would give them with all of the ADU experience that you have up to this point?
Yeah, read, 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 and call your permit office. We have all this creative stuff on this at aduloans.net, but talking to your local permit office, giving them a call, it's just that easy. For step number 1, talk to your permit office. Step number 2, get pre-approved. And then step number 3, find a design build company that can design and build all in one, because I find that their designs tend to have that value engineering, and then get a move on.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, the design build company, you want the kind of the all-in-one package there. You'll save some money on
Yep.
it, and you'll get people who have done this before, and that's ultimately what you're looking for, not just a kind of flip, but also a build and a little bit of development background
Yeah.
would be super helpful.
In California, I have great references. I don't get referral fees. I don't give referral fees. Everybody just needs to do their job.
Yeah, love that. Meredith, this has been absolutely incredible. And I know you said, is it ADU.net?
aduloans.net.
aduloans.net, and I saw there's a calculator on there that really
Yep.
goes into calculations on square footage and construction costs and all of that stuff. And that's a great way to get started to figure out, because I think you said it early on the top of the show, is get pre-approved, figure that out first. That's your upper bound, right? And then work
Right.
backwards from there. And you can
Yep.
use the tools on aduloans.net to get you squared away. Now that this has been really, really awesome.
Good.
Thanks for taking the time to come on the show, and I'm sure we will have a lot of questions for you. How can folks get in touch with you?
Yeah. Take a look again at aduloans.net. They can book a personal call on my calendar. My
Oh,
calendar's
perfect.
wide open, and we'll set up a 30-minute strategy session.
I love that. Guys, make sure you get connected. Get connected with Meredith if you're interested in this and you want to go down that road. Go for it. I mean, that's what it's all about. That we're about learning, we're about networking here, but most of all, we are about taking action. And one more note for you guys. You're listening to this podcast. Meredith, you've been an absolutely incredible guest, sharing so much information. Don't forget about ADPI Con, our second national event going down in San Antonio in October. Tickets are almost sold out. I do not want you to miss this event. One, because I'm going to be there. Everyone's going to be there. It's going to be awesome. But 2, we have awesome speakers. Hal Elrod is keynoting. Rod Cleef is going to be keynoting. Jay Scott from Bigger Pockets is going to be sharing the stage with us. It's just really, really, really awesome. And it's the largest military real estate investing conference on the planet. So it's going to be super cool. Meredith, thank you so much for coming on the show. And we're going to have you back on when this ADU craze spreads around the country and you go nationwide. We're going to have you back on.
You got it.
All
Thanks,
right.
Kevin.
Thanks so much.